All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 1883 Speaker Series. My name is Mike Wozniak. I serve as the Coordinator of Leadership and Programming in the Student Involvement and Parent Programs Office. Each week, we invite a campus or community leader to talk about how today's student can develop their leadership skills, as well as other advice regarding personal and professional development. We hope you learn some valuable lessons in the next 18 minutes and 83 seconds. For today's speaker, please join me in welcoming the Executive Director of the United Way of Grand Forks and East Grand Forks, Heather Novak.
Thank you. All right. Can everyone hear me okay? All right. I'm Heather. I'm the Executive Director of United Way of Grand Forks, East Grand Forks, and area. And when I was first asked to make this presentation, first I felt honored, and then instantly I felt fear. What do I know about leadership and professionalism and professional development that not everybody else knows? And so as I sat back and reflected and wrote out my speech on how I became a leader to today, the words flew. They just went. So that was very exciting. But let's jump back 15 years ago. I know that kind of dates me a little bit. You said I was standing up here doing an 1883 presentation, I would have said, you are crazy. I don't do presentations. I don't speak in front of people. And I was always the behind the scenes girl, all the way from when I was back in high school, through college, through my first couple of years, I was behind the scenes. And that's where I loved being. And now here I am today, giving business presentations weekly to thousands of people, running a large nonprofit in the community, and being a leader to my staff. Let's jump back to where that journey began. When I was young, my childhood looked a lot different than others, not in a bad way by any means, but my parents were military. And my mom and dad believed in responsibility and respect, and they instilled that in us at a very, very young age. I remember my parents, I was probably 7, my sister was 5, and they were gonna go buy a vehicle. And I remember dad turning around and saying, do not say anything, do not ask for anything, and do not touch anything when we walk into this building. My sister and I are like, okay. And we didn't. We went in there, we sat down, we had our hands on our laps, and the salesperson is like, your kids are so good. And I remember now that I look back, I'm like, I wonder what they did to get us to do those things, because we did. We listened very well. And then after that, as I got a little bit older in elementary school and early high school, things were different because we had responsibilities. We knew that as soon as school was done, we had to come home and we did our homework, we did our chores, and then we were allowed to go out and do different things. And I remember being frustrated because I had all my other friends who right after school, they're like, hey, we're gonna go do this. Do you wanna go? And I'm like, no, because I have to go home and do my homework and do my chores before I'm allowed to do anything else. And the frustration was big back then, but now when I look back, my first 2 mentors who have really molded me into the person I am today are my parents. And if it wasn't for them instilling that responsibility, I don't know if I would be where I am today. They're really the ones who have built me to be this leader. And I hope most parents are out there doing that for their kids. Through high school, school was a struggle. I was not that straight A girl by any means. I had A's, B's, and C's. I remember reading an entire chapter and being so frustrated because I couldn't remember what I read. Like I read it just fine, but retaining it was a different story. And I worked so hard. Thankfully, my dad would sit down and do acronyms for me with testing all through high school. And not everything came super easy. My sister, on the other hand, she didn't have to open a book. And I'm like, man, I really wish some days that was me. But it really made me work harder to be the person that I've become today. And, after school, so I get through high school, I made it through high school, and I knew right away what I wanted to do. I knew from a very young age, I wanted to work with kids, and I was going to go to Mayville State University and get my early childhood education. I was going to get my elementary education, and that's what I was going to do. I worked through the ESP program through my entire year of high school. And my favorite thing about working with kids is when they finally get something and they've got that like glow on their face, like, hey, I got this. And after seeing that so many times, I'm like, that's what I'm going to do. And so I enrolled in Mayville State for elementary ed, early childhood education. And that's where the next step of my journey began. When I was in college, I worked at a gas station, and he had offered me to be able to do books for him. Like, hey, here's how to do QuickBooks. It's a really easy program. You definitely can do it. I'm like, okay. I had loved numbers through high school, was not into the English piece of it, but I loved numbers. And so I started working with him, and he would teach me some things. And then I got through halfway through my sophomore year, and I'm like, okay, I really like numbers. I don't know if elementary ed is what I want to do anymore. And so at that point in my life, I'm like, whoa, now I don't really know what I want to do. And here I am a year and a half into school wondering what's next. So I changed my majors. I went and changed my major to do business administration with a specialization in accounting, and still continue on with my early childhood education, thinking that I could do one or the other, or I could intermingle them and run a childcare center and do both. And so I graduated with Mayville State University in July of 2010. And I was applying for jobs, and my first job that I got, I was so excited, was an executive director of a childcare center. And I'm like, I went to school for 4 years for early childhood. I know what I'm doing. And I get into that position, I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Schooling is so different than being in that real world. And they had these two books. One is green, one is pink, one is for preschool regulations, and one is for early childhood regulations. And I'm like, okay, let me remind you, I'm not one who reads and retains all the time. And so I'm like, I have to read these. And I think I read those books 15 times easily. They became my handheld Bible so that I could make sure that we were following all the regulations of that childcare center. And then right away, as an executive director, I was overseeing staff. That is not an easy thing to do on a regular basis, let alone being 22 and overseeing staff. So I worked at this Devil's Lake Child Care Center for 2 years. I learned probably more than I could have ever known. I became very close with the licensor, and she was another mentor to me who she would teach me things and not write us up and be like, hey, you're going to get all this trouble. Instead, she's like, okay, do it this way and do it this way. And we would talk through those things. But after 2 years of working at Devil's Lake, and I was living in Larimore at the time, I realized I need something that's closer to where I live, because it's an hour one way. So I was applying for jobs in Grand Forks, and I was applying for bank jobs, and I was applying for early childhood education jobs. And I applied for a job at Northlands Rescue Mission as a business manager. And I'm like, I know how to do most of the things on their list, so I think I would be okay. And I got the position in August of 2012. And I began working for Dave Senna. And I really truly feel within the first 90 days, I knew that I had stepped into a career that I was going to love for the rest of my life. I didn't know a lot about nonprofit direct service. I didn't know a lot about homeless shelters, but I just right away loved what I was doing. I felt like I was in over my head most days. I luckily had another mentor. It works for an accounting company, and she would teach me things, not just, hey, you got to put this here and do this here and do this here. she would say, hey, you got to do A, B, C, and D, and here's why you need to do these things. Because if they're not telling you the reason why, do you really learn, or do you just do it because you have to do it? This time of my life is really where my mindset changed, my skills changed, where I learned more than I probably ever could have learned. Working with Dave, he was very good about encouraging his staff. He led with his heart. He was true to family and health. And because of the type of person he was, I realized that I want to be that type of person one day. If I oversee staff, I want to be that type of flexible person and guiding. And so I went from being the business manager to then I was a business manager and I oversaw the kitchen. I don't cook, but I was able to oversee the kitchen. I went and took a ServSafe certification class, and then I taught ServSafe certification for clients. I then, after that, started dabbling into the HR and taking courses in HR and really just learning every aspect of whatever Dave at that time would allow me to learn. And Dave became my professional and life mentor. He made a change on my life back in 2012 that I feel like has changed me forever at this point. In the winter of 2014, Dave left the mission, and I was still there. The new executive director that they got and myself, our values didn't really sync. And so I decided that, I really want to be working with somebody that we have the same values and the same looking for. And so I left there, went back to a job in Grand Forks, but as the executive director of a childcare center, but with a whole different mindset than the one that I did when I started right out of college. I knew that I wanted to be a director like Dave was. I wanted to build a team. I wanted to have an open door policy. And I had a staff member, after I had been there for quite some time, I had a staff member come to me and say, if it wasn't for your open door policy, I wouldn't have been where I am today, because I allowed my staff to come in and have those conversations. People tell you, leave your personal at the door, but is that really possible? Because it's always on your mind. And being the boots on the ground leader, I have done that for years. Again, same thing that I had learned from Dave, like when I was at that childcare center as their ED, and we needed somebody to jump in the classroom or clean a bathroom or cook. Again, I'm not a great cook, but I surely did it for those kiddos. Or did dishes. You jump in. As a leader, you jump in your boots on the ground, whatever your staff need. And then 2016, again, my life changed. So I got a call from the board chair at Northlands who had asked me to come back. Their executive director had left. I knew quite a bit about Northlands and the operation piece of it. And so I came back as as the director of operations. Again, I was always behind the scenes. So I oversaw their volunteer department and their dining services department. I started dabbling in working with clients and HR and accounting and just really the whole realm of a nonprofit. And this is where my next path really began, because even though I left that childcare center, I started a side contract with them doing their accounting and their HR. I eventually joined the Third Street Clinic board to learn more about nonprofits. At this point, I wanted to know how every single department intertwined in a nonprofit. I wanted to learn why the development department and the volunteer department and the clients department all intermingled and how they made each other work. And then in the fall of 2018, after a lot of consideration, I decided I was going to open my own company. I knew the ins and outs of a nonprofit, and I wanted to help other nonprofits. So I launched my company, and as of January 1st of 2019, I still to this day have this company, but I work with nonprofits to help with that HR and policies and those accounting and how do you track grants and all of those things. But then not long after I made that decision, I found out I was expecting my first child. So then I was very nervous because here I am at a new spot in my life with my own company, wondering if it's going to fail, if I'm going to be able to have my kiddo and support my child. There was so many things running through my head, but I loved what I was doing. I got to teach, but not teach in a school. I worked with Dave with my company also, and he continued to teach me more about the development and marketing piece, which is something that I had lacked in my previous years, and really what it meant to be a true leader. And then in April of 2019, Dave was offered the executive position at United Way. He asked me to come on as a contractor, and I'm like, yes, I got another contract. I get to help another nonprofit. I was so excited. But then not long after, he's like, okay, I really need you to come on full time. Is this something you'd be interested in? And I was kind of torn because I had my company, but I was having a little boy and I wanted to make sure that I could support him too. And so I did. I accepted the position of Director of Operations at United Way, and I came on in the fall of 2019 full time. I still had my company on the side and I had a newborn. So that whole first year was kind of a blur now that I think about it, but it was good. Again, I continued learning. And then in 21, right as COVID was still in the mix of things, Dave got COVID and he was out for about 8 weeks. Well, as the Director of Operations, you're the next one to step up. And so we had an event of 150 people. And Dave said, I'm not going to be able to be there. I need you to step in. I'm like, okay, I will make sure this event goes off with a hit. And then he's like, but you have to give the presentation. I'm like, I don't speak in public. I don't do speaking. I'm not good at speaking. I was so nervous. So I stood up at this podium like this. I'm pretty sure I sweated bullets the whole time. I didn't move. But I made it through and realized that, hey, that's one more thing that I can do. And then in May of 21, Dave's mom passed away from COVID also. And in July, Dave decided that him and his family were going to move down to the cities. And so everybody at the office is wondering what's going to happen, who's going to be the new executive director. The board had asked me to come in as interim, and I happily said yes. And then again, I'm like petrified. What if I fail? I don't know anything about marketing. I don't know anything about fundraising, and then just the fear of change in general. And so after many conversations with my parents, who were my mentors, Dave, who's a mentor, my significant other, I decided that I was going to apply for the position of executive director, and I did. And in October of 2021, I got that position as executive director. And let me tell you, I was not any less nervous than I was when I took the interim position. My first radio interview that I had, I remember I can call into the radio every Friday. So if you hear me on KNOX, I call into the radio every Friday, and my very first one, I'm sitting in my home office. I've got everything written on my piece of paper, and I am sweating bullets through this whole 5-minute interview. And I didn't even give him time to have a conversation with me. I just went, done. And now I look back and I'm like, man, I was crazy. That isn't that hard. I go on the radio every Friday. I get up and have campaign presentations to thousands of people all the time. We just did 19 of them last week. And so throughout the years, you grow and change, and facing my fears, doing campaign presentations, and then comes to leading a staff. And that by far is my favorite piece of being a leader, is my staff. I will always have an open door policy. I had a staff member about 1.5 years ago call me and say, hey, I don't know if this position is for me. I'm not really sure what I want to do in life, but I don't want you to be mad. And I said, I'm never going to be mad at you for wanting to advance professionally and personally. Even if you're not working with me, if you need anything or if you need a letter of recommendation, I want you to find out what you love doing, because I have a job that I love going to every single day. And so being a leader is hard. There's lots of things that come with it. I really, truly believe in giving your staff opportunities to succeed and setting them up. I want to be able to educate and teach, and not just teach my staff, but even community members. We had a community partner come in last week, and I'm like, hey, we have this really great program. I think you guys would benefit from it. If you want any, if you need anything, let me know. And then I have 2 little boys, and I want to teach them about giving back to the community that they're in. So I've grown professionally as a leader over the last 13 years after graduating college, facing fears and learning from mistakes, and becoming the leader that I wanted to be. And what makes a leader? Lots of things make a leader. Feeling of defeat was probably one of my biggest ones, because you don't always succeed all the time. Being told no for a donation for the very first time was like heart-wrenching. But you get up and you keep going. You learn to grow and adapt and encourage. And I do what I do every day, 1 for the clients that we work with, but 2 for the staff that I have. And you can ask any of my staff, I truly, truly believe in them and believe in what they do. And I work hard because they deserve that. So I learned you can do anything you set your mind to. You choose the person you're going to be, the lives you're going to change, and the leader that you're going to be, because not every leader is the same and every leadership position looks different. But always remember, if you're overseeing staff, be there for their best and for their worst. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. All right, everyone. Thank you all for coming as well. Join us next week when our speaker will be Anna Rosberg, General Manager of the Aviation. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of your day.